Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for joining today's Watch and Learn webinar, Creating Connections and Community in Your Live Virtual Training. I'd like to thank today's sponsor, Class. Class is a software developed by Class Technologies that transforms a typical company-based learning and development experience into an interactive virtual one. Class enables instructors to take attendance, hand out assignments, share media interactively, and talk one-to-one with participants, all without leaving the platform. I'm Alexandria Clapp, the Content Manager for Learning Technologies and Sciences at ATD, and I'll be your moderator today. I know our speaker plans to keep you engaged throughout our session, so as Joy mentioned, share those questions and comments with your fellow participants in our chat box, and we'll save time for Q&A at the end of our session, so I'll save new and unanswered questions to be addressed then. And now I'm very pleased to introduce today's speaker, Ben Lowell. Ben is a strategic advisor for Class and has dedicated a career to educating others as a facilitator, instructional designer, Spanish teacher, e-learning director, and learning consultant. So we're looking forward to learning more about creating connections and community in our trainings. And without further ado, I will pass it over to him to take it away for us today.
Thank you, Alexandria. It's a pleasure to be here. Pleasure to be with you all. Thank you for coming and joining, and hopefully we can have some fun today and learn a little bit. Hope to learn some things from you, and hopefully we can learn from each other. I noticed a couple of people started the trend of putting in their location into the chat. I'd love to just get a representation of where everybody's from. So go ahead and just jump in the chat. Tell us where you're from. I'd love to see where you're all coming from. I'm in just north of Salt Lake City, Utah. So if we have any fellow Utahns out here, that'd be great. Let's see, Florence, Kentucky, Maui. We had some from Vicksburg, Mississippi, Maryland, just outside of Chicago, KC. Hey, I had my Kansas City jersey on the other day. Go Chiefs. Belgium, excellent. Colorado, let's see where else. Las Vegas, Michigan, Portugal, excelente. Nairobi, Kenya, goodness gracious. San Rafael. Boston, Atlanta, Dallas, Cleveland, Duluth, and more Atlanta. Let's see, Tarpon, Florida, Buffalo, Auckland, New Zealand, South Jersey, Michigan. Wow, we got a whole representation here. Pennsylvania, Texas, more Belgium, Wisconsin. Go Braves. In the midst of a World Series. Excellent. Thanks, everyone. Continue chatting and have a little fun with it. The next question I want to ask is a little bit more specific to the content today. So we're going to be talking a little bit about virtual instructor-led trainings and what that means and how we can infuse more connection and community within those trainings before, during, and after. And so as part of that, I'd love to see a representation of the various roles that are represented. So in your current role, go ahead and put in your title. What is it that you do? How is it connected to learning and development? What are you specifically doing with virtual ILT? So customer service training, leadership program, L&D. I'm just reading a bunch of these. Director of learning development, process trainer, coordinator, talent management, business communication specialist, program manager, HR, development for new employees, instructional designer, excellent leadership development, learning advisor, public affairs specialist. Interesting. Public affairs. Yep. Definitely training and communication, training specialist, learning consultant, L&D manager, career and professional development, senior partner. Excellent. Okay, good. We have a really broad spectrum of positions, of titles. Excellent. Wow. We have some very well-educated individuals as well. Doctors of L&D for higher ed. Wonderful. Thank you for participating in that. I want to make sure that everybody feels comfortable, but also that we see that there's a breadth of knowledge and experience within just this conversation. And so I hope that as a part of that, instead of just relying on me to provide some nuggets of wisdom, I'm not the sharpest tool in the shed, but we have a lot of smart people today on the call. So as we are going, hopefully there can be some collaboration through the chat that enables us to connect with people. Hopefully, maybe there's some connecting on LinkedIn happening between individuals here as well. Let's create a real strong community just within this webinar of those who are looking to learn from each other and trying to enhance their own facilitation practices when it comes to their business and the learning outcomes you're looking to achieve. So I'll go ahead and start sharing my screen and we can jump into the presentation. Everybody, hopefully, let me present mode. Okay, so we're seeing this creating connection, community, and VLTs. Everybody good there? Okay, excellent. So I want to start out by just talking a little bit about some experiences I've had in training and development. So I'm gonna rewind everything a little bit back to February 2020. I was with a different company. I was new to the organization, and we were going through training. And the training was set up this way. The training was our company had hired an external training company to come in and provide a very intensive content delivery model, right? So this is something they'd partnered with, had a contract in place for a while. So this external training company was coming in to prepare this organization for next steps. And the design of the training was everybody gathers in a hotel conference room, and we have 3 days of 8 to 8. I'm not even kidding, 8 to 8. We're in a training room, in a conference room in a hotel. We had multiple trainers from the training company. I think there were maybe 10 to 12 trainers in person there at this location from the training company. And there were probably 50 to 60 of us representing the actual organization who were there to be trained and upskilled. And maybe some of you have had this experience where, as a trainer, sometimes the content isn't exactly what you imagine when you're in a training. So maybe we check out a little bit more. Maybe that's just my experience, but I tend to be a little bit more critical of facilitation and training and things that I don't feel are working well. And this training was designed to, give really good, intensive, in-person feedback. And we were learning skills, conversation skills, dialogue skills. A lot of it was very, in my view, it was outdated. It was some of the conversations we were having felt like something we would be doing in the mid 90s, maybe late 90s, even perhaps. Just the way of the delivery, not just of the training, but the actual conversations and dialogue we were having were outdated. All of the materials for this training were physical. We were handed out booklets, right? This is in 2020. So everything was handed out, physical. We were writing, and I don't have a problem with physical. I love to write. I got my notepad here, and I'm constantly taking notes, just pen and paper. So I still do this all the time. But there were no digital materials at all. There were no materials of follow-up after the training was over. Everything was done there. It was a very outdated, in my view, delivery model. But we were all in person, right? And so you would expect, if you're in person, you're developing better connection and you have more collaboration and community, and then the training should be better, right? Because it's in person. My experience was it wasn't that great. Not just the content, but the experience overall was a bit odd. And it didn't feel like there was a lot of connection and community, especially the trainers. I felt like a lot of times the trainers and the company they were expected to train were butting heads a lot on different topics and issues. And so anyways, needless to say, it wasn't my favorite experience. And the head of the training group didn't really like me either, which I'm sure you can imagine. I was a bit of a smart aleck, and I didn't necessarily hide it. So maybe I wasn't the best participant. And I'll take full responsibility for that. At the end of the training, after the 3 days, I wanted to offer real feedback. I wanted to offer my opinion, my perspective of this overall experience, not just to my company, but to the trainers themselves. And I feel like there were some things that I would want to update. And so I drafted an email to send to them. And basically my assessment and my analysis was, I feel like some of the content was good. I feel like more collaboration with the company and making sure that your content is more custom to our needs would be more effective. And I felt like the model of delivery being all in person, always for 8 to 8, 3 days straight, was outdated and outmoded and should evolve. Otherwise, I felt like the model is, in my opinion, the model is an endangered species and will become extinct if, not changing. So that was my feedback. I was going to send it. I never did. My wife convinced me, you know what? They don't care. They don't want to hear from you. You kind of ticked them off a little bit. So they're not going to listen to it anyway. So I never sent the email. Whether or not that was the right thing to do, whatever. But fast forward after the training, right? We there March 11, 2020. I was on a plane. I was headed to Ukraine for a project I was working on, and I landed March 11th. I flew out of Salt Lake, went to Denver, then caught the flight to Munich. Was in air all during craziness that was ensuing on the American continent and really the whole world. So I landed in Munich. My connecting flight was connecting to Kyiv, and I got off the plane and had about 45 minutes between deplaning and having to get onto the next plane. And my phone blew up. Text messages, phone calls, voicemails, everything. And then I pulled up the news feed, and it was crazy, right? Lots of stuff happened. Trump suspends all travel from Europe for 30 days, the COVID. And I'm a Utah Jazz fan. So of course, all of the other information, that there was a Jazz game that night and the NBA was shut down because Rudy Gobert test positive for COVID, and the Utah schools were going to shut down, and the NCAA tournament was shut down. All of these things happened all literally for me overnight because I was on a plane. It's 3 a.m. at home, and this all happened. And immediately the world changed. We were all forced into a different model. And I often think back, what happened to this training company? I have had no conversations. I have had no connections with them, but I wondered, what did they do? And I imagine they're pretty capable people and they're very intelligent. I imagine they shifted as quickly as possible to online. They tried to create all of their materials in a digital format. They probably figured out how to have some sort of an online presence and presentation via Zoom or some other tool. And they adapted, is what I imagine. I don't know what happened, but this is what I imagine. And I imagine that because I imagine all of the rest of you in your organizations had to do something similar. We have to pivot. We have to figure out what to do. And each organization was at a different level of preparedness for this kind of a disaster. Some companies were completely unprepared, and that's kind of this training company I was thinking of. Nothing was digital, everything was in person. Their whole model relied on in-person training and physical materials. And so if they did nothing, they did become extinct. They would have had to go out of business. And the various businesses you all work with, I'm sure there was a spectrum, right, of preparedness for this kind of transition. And so I'd like to ask about that for just a minute. So we were forced into this virtual training world, whether we wanted to or not. Some companies were already doing it. Some companies had adopted this 10, 15 years ago almost, the minute virtual and video conferencing was available, and others had never touched it and didn't intend to touch it. So now we're all forced into this boat. We have to, virtual. So this is the question I want to ask. And go ahead and start jumping into the chat and offering some comments. Feel free to share, thoughts, but what are the biggest challenges you have faced with VILT? What are the biggest things you're seeing that create difficulty? Engagement, technical difficulties, breakouts, facilitator feedback, cameras on. Is it a mandate? Do we do it silently? Great. Technology, biggest challenge getting into our LMS and folks get credit for it. Fantastic. Hybrid classes, transcripts of and attendance, gauging if the learner is still with me, can't read body language, working from home until COVID, everything was converted to virtual facilitation. Yep. Zoom fatigue. Wow. Yep. Too much time on Zoom, need to recreate hybrid synchronous and asynchronous. Excellent. Educating organization on how to, great. Facilitating and handling a breakout group. Excellent. Participation. Yes. Virtual tools as if in person. Yeah. Okay. So how do we have this in-person experience, and how do we translate that to virtual? That's exactly what we do. And the company I joined as a result of all of this is dedicated to finding out how do we make the physical in-classroom experience, that when they're good, how do we translate that to an online experience and still maintain some of those same tools, some of the same processes and procedures and techniques? So I'm not going to really go into all of that today. I'm happy to discuss that in a different moment, but I just want you to know, like, everybody faces this challenge, and it's apparent because we've got dozens of comments here in the chat that are responding to this question. And so I'm gonna bring this back and say, first of all, you're absolutely right. The human experience was disrupted. We've seen it. Learners' abilities to connect and collaborate together is different now. It's harder. There's some challenges we have to address. I'm still reading the chat too here. Participants have private space to participate in. Great. Disruptions. Oh yeah, man. How do you manage that? Instructors and facilitators had to redesign and create focus and engagement. So all of the things you're saying here, focus, engagement, those are some of the most difficult challenges that facilitators had to learn how to overcome, and probably still are. How do we do this? How do we have better engagement in these sessions? And finally, administrators, how do you track it and scale it? I've seen all of those comments in here. Attendance, tracking participation. How do you deliver this across multiple? And I'm still reading the chat here. Not being able to read body language, different levels of processing, completely. So many questions, so many challenges, and we're all going through it together. So I hope that through this session, we can learn to rely on more of our own community. And when I say our own community, I mean the people who are invested in learning and development. And when everybody posted their job title, there's not just L&D folks here. There are HR folks, there are sales folks, there are PR folks, there are other departments, operations that are involved in learning. In fact, I would wager to say that every department has some connection to learning, whether they know it or not. Everybody needs to know how to connect. And as much as all of this is true, I'll respond with this. And this might sound a little counterintuitive. I work for a tech company. My whole company and our focus and our success is the success of the technology. But I will stick by this statement no matter who talks to me. Technology will not solve your problems. People solve problems. And the things that you were working on, the things you're thinking about and considering today, and the groups you're working with, whether it's internal or external, you are going to come up with strategies that fix these challenges, that address these challenges. And then once you have a really solid strategy in place, once you think you know the best approach or the best approaches, and you're continuing to adapt those approaches to the changing environment, then you can find supporting softwares and technologies that will enhance or allow you to, or enable you to deliver training in that way. But make sure, yes, Rochelle Cooper, technology assists but doesn't solve. I've worked in too many tech companies. I've worked with too many businesses that assume that I buy a piece of software, it's implemented, our problem's solved. It's not going to happen. Promise you. It's very ineffective, that strategy. In fact, most of the time, my experience as a tech helping companies implement their software, when they think that, I can almost guarantee that the implementation and the software will fail, because they're assuming that a technology is going to just fix everything. It won't. So yes, I agree with you. It assists. It is the instrument or the tool by which you can achieve your metrics and goals and measures. And there are multiple ways to do that and multiple softwares that can help and assist. But make sure you have devised a strategy and solutions, not just with you, but all of the people that are connected to this. And this takes us to our first point. In my estimation, there's nothing more important to learning initiatives than making sure the business is backing that initiative. They have to be bought into it. They have to be sold on the concept. It's even better if it's their idea, right? It's helpful if you and the only way you're going to achieve this is you have to meet regularly with those business units. You have to have good rapport, good connection, good information, and good overall good connection with these people. All of the leaders of the business units that your learning and initiatives are going to affect. If this doesn't happen, then the result is pretty clear, and we see this across the industry. So let's talk about this. If this doesn't happen, I think these are some of the results. 94% of employees would stay longer at a company if they felt like it was investing in their career development. Okay, well, man, this is a national average, and this comes from LinkedIn Learning, by the way, this study. Average NPS for L&D is a -25. So are we helping with professional development? Are we helping with career development? That's a good question. 85% of employees are struggling to find the needed training. Okay. How about 81% of executives constantly say talent is our number one priority. Number one priority. NPS. So I see that in the chat. Net Promoter Score. Thank you. If somebody in the chat wants to throw in just like a brief description of NPS, that would be helpful. Executives care about talent, at least they always say they do, but it's not always the most visible metric. And sometimes they don't know how to measure what is really impacting the best talent. And then finally, 2 of 3 talent developers would not recommend their own programs. Yikes. That's a bit rough. And this, to me, is a symptom of the larger problem, which is we're building content. We're doing it. We're delivering content, but it's not really, in a lot of cases, it's not solving any issues. It's not creating the behavioral change that you need. That's difficult. So this is another indictment on the same system. According to Harvard Business Review, $350 billion annually, globally spent on programs, training programs across all these different units. And out of all of that, only 12% of learners report they have and could apply the needed skills for their job. Again, so what's telling me is we're not delivering training. We're doing our jobs. Learning is happening, or learning initiatives are taking place because there's money being spent on it, but the results aren't there. And that's, again, I'm not trying to make an indictment across all of this audience here, but it's clear that it's not fitting the bill. And I believe that part of that has to do with the dynamic between the business and the learning team. A lot of times that dynamic is just like this, similar to the dynamic I had with the trainers and the people. It wasn't meeting our needs, but we were all in person. We spent 3 days all in the same training, all in a hotel. We were jammed in there for 3 days. It should work, right? We spent tons of money on it. And my assessment is it wasn't that effective. We spent a lot of money on it. We were all in person, but just by virtue of being in person, it doesn't mean the learning outcomes are going to be met. It doesn't mean that your business is going to be more effective. It doesn't mean that you're spending $350 billion and it's all of a sudden going to work. Just like if I buy this technology, it's going to solve our problems. Throwing money at it doesn't necessarily fix it either. So if we are meeting regularly with business leaders who are influencing those decisions and we're taking feedback from them, we'll know we need to meet with them. We need to be on the same page with them. They need to be on board with the training strategy. And we have to learn how to tactfully push back when they ask for one thing and we don't believe that that is going to deliver the correct outcomes. Sometimes our business leaders don't know how to translate what they need into a training initiative. That's our job. We're learning consultants. We're in L&D. We know what learning means and what it typically should look like. And if we don't, we need to skill up ourselves and we need to hire people who are intelligent and know how to do this. We can help them translate what is needed from the business aspect into a training situation. And if we don't have good rapport and good relationships with those people, they're not going to listen to us. So they're going to tell us what they want. We're going to go along with it. We're going to build it. And we know it's garbage, but we're going to give it to them anyways, because that's what they asked for. We have to be a little bit better. And again, to me, it's meet with them regularly. Show them you care. Show them you're interested. Prove to them that your ideas will be successful. Prove it to them. Sometimes you have to start small, and then you can expand that influence. But it just requires a lot of consistency. So we can't ignore it. We have to meet with them regularly. So we have to understand the why of the organization, and going into those meetings, we have to know what is it that they really need. This is where we become actually true consultants. Go in and learn everything it is about their business unit. What are the challenges? What are their successes? Where are they failing and why? What is the opinion? And then after we've gathered all the information, then we can go in and offer solutions together jointly. So this is where it's going to get a little interesting. This is a virtual session. We're all connected in this virtual world. I want you to take a few minutes and just think about, ponder. You have training initiatives you are either working on right now that are in play, or they are coming up soon. All of us are thinking about it. So I want you to consider one of those initiatives and consider, okay, who is it that I need to meet with? Who are the audiences that I have to set up times with? And take the next 2 to 3 minutes and create some goals. Just write them down, pen and paper if you want, take notes on your tablet or phone or computer, whatever is best for you. I want you to write down a goal. Who do you need to meet with? How frequently are you going to do this? And come up with the way to frame that. Why do we need to do this and frequently? So I'm gonna give you 2 minutes right now. I'm gonna set my timer. You're not gonna see it, but you'll hear it. We can be silent for a minute. I'm just gonna read through some of the chat here. So if you have questions, I'll be prepared to answer that. But go ahead and just think about it for just a few minutes. Yeah, by the way, I'm going to be quiet. So if there's silence, don't worry. You still have an audio feed. Thank you, Joy, for pointing that out. Here's a comment from Beck I really like. We rely on SMEs often, and we forget we're SMEs ourselves when it comes to learning and development. We know, we've done it, we've seen it, we've been educated in it, we've practiced it, we're experienced, we have wisdom to offer. So don't sell yourself short on your proposed solutions, and find a tactful way to deliver helpful ideas. Okay, I know it's probably a little shorter than we thought, but go ahead, if you're comfortable, go ahead and type in one of the goals you have in the chat. We're not gonna do this audibly, but if you have a goal that's specific to a specific department or team, how are we gonna meet and how often and why? Type it into the chat and let's see if I can highlight a few of these examples. Okay, so instructional design SMEs and discuss the gaps. Yes, meet bi-monthly, perfect. Doesn't have to take a long time. Meet with the general managers and follow up on a meeting from July. Excellent. Make sure you get on their calendar frequently. And I know they're busy. But if you make it a priority and just be persistent with them and give them something valuable and not waste their time, they're going to see it. Meet with the new manager, share my vision of L&D at the firm. Excellent. So important. Meet weekly with the VP of the area I'm developing training for. Yes. If you are just constantly in their ear, a great question that a lot of colleagues have asked is they'll meet with leaders, whether it's CEO or a regional leader. What keeps you up at night? What do you worry about? Ask them those questions when you're doing this. Follow up on requests for monitor. Excellent. Meet every other week with our executive director. Excellent. Think about other people, audiences that are also important here. And this takes us to our next topic. So thank you for sharing. I appreciate, continue to add in there and feel free to connect with people as we're doing this. Listen and gather feedback is step number 2. So obviously meeting regularly, but then listening and caring and gathering the feedback. And there's various ways to do this. You can do informal surveys. You can do formal surveys. You can sit and talk to people and interview, right? Interview the entry-level positions you're training for. Interview the managers, those entry-level manager positions. Interview VPs. Interview any of the people you can talk to. Gather as much information as possible. It can't hurt. It can only help, and it can also show how interested you are in the success of that business unit. If you're having trouble connecting with a manager who doesn't think that your time is valuable, and you start spending all this time meeting with their people, asking questions, gathering feedback, finding out what challenges they need to address, and they see this, whether it's virtual or in person, doesn't matter. Focus groups, yes, thank you, Megan. Same idea, as much of that as you can do as possible. Continue to hear that. Now, unfortunately, our learners don't all believe that we're listening, right? These are some bad numbers here. Training provided at my company is very effective, 16%. Oof. L&D helps with career progression. We already heard that. Well, that's a little higher, so at least they feel that. L&D helps performance. Wow. L&D helps understand the organization. Yeah, no. I'm leading one of the comments here. Do not be defensive. Definitely not. Do not, like, we don't have the time to take offense at things that people don't like. We just need to iterate and deliver better content. And yes, if you expect companies and employees to want to learn and train, we have to be the examples of that. We have to just be able to understand that we are constantly learning and adjusting as well. And if we're not, we're going to get in trouble. Some of the information we sometimes miss. There are a lot of people that want to invest personal time in learning. There are a lot of people that want to control when and where and how they learn. More skill development, more control. They want to be, these are adult learning principles, right? 101. People want influence. People want impact. They want to control and have input, and they need things to be relevant. Not only that, listen to this. People want to work remote. They love working remote. It's a positive thing for almost everybody in your organization. So what world are we in right now? Well, a lot of companies are saying you can always work remote. Maybe that's not every organization. There will always be some, but I imagine if you're in a company that experienced the pandemic over the last 2 years, they're at least considering, how does a remote workforce even function in our company? Can we do it long term? Is there a way to do remote work? Is there a way to have some hybrid? Is there a way? So companies are listening. Companies are doing this. And what we're finding is that because of remote work, people are more engaged. They can be. They're more likely to want to stay at their company, 3.5 times more likely to stay. And I'm a perfect example of this. My organization that I was with, the one that we talked about with the training company, they built this brand new facility, and they all moved to this new in-person facility. And they're requiring basically all employees, at least within my group, to be there in person. And I got used to being remote during my job here, my new job, or excuse me, during COVID. We were all remote. And as a result of this, everybody's required to be in the office. I was looking around because I preferred the remote work, and I joined a company now we're 100% remote. So we have to be flexible. We have to listen, and don't assume that just because it's not in person, you can't have collaboration and connection, that you can't have some sort of human connection. I love in-person trainings. I think they're fantastic if they're designed well. But just because it's virtual, it doesn't mean it's lesser than. It doesn't have to be a lesser experience if we do it right. Okay, so I want you to think, same idea. Take a few minutes and just write down, feel free to add it into the chat, but create some goals around, how am I going to gather better feedback? Think back to the main initiative that you're thinking about. How can I get better feedback? What can I do officially that is, gathering that data and listening? And if you don't have the time to do it, who in the company does, or who can you even email to receive that feedback? There are ways to gather it. So think about this. This is part of that delivery, part of that model. And then as you're taking these goals, feel free to start writing them into the chat if you want to. This is a goal I'm going to make. I'll give you an example of something that we did. In an organization I was working with several years back, the organization was a retail chain of sports apparel stores. They were mostly in malls. And so they were small square footage, but they had a lot of product that they had to sell. And so I wanted to find out across the whole company, across all the people, what did they care about? What were the things that motivated them? What did they like? What did they not like? What did they feel prepared with? What did they not? And I sent it out to every representative. And I did it like a Survey Monkey or something like that. Yeah, somebody's saying here, like, send out Survey Monkeys with open-ended questions. Great. So I gathered the feedback from all of the employees, and this was the first week or two of the job. And I shared this with basically the decision makers of the industry, the business. And they said, wow, we didn't know this was important to them. So I said, what if we build training modules around these initiatives? And they said, that actually sounds like a good idea because it's meeting the metrics. So if you have data that you can take to your business leaders, especially in a finance area or operations, they want metrics, they want data. They're very data driven. So bring the data to them, show them what matters, and then build solutions jointly around those. I'm looking at a few of these comments. We have course surveys, good. Text comment areas. I'm going to use technique as I transition to the L&D specialist. Excellent. Training programs, they're required to start with an assessment and retention questions. Excellent. Do that at the beginning. If you can do it at the end, excellent. Always reevaluate your training. Yes, Kelly, thank you. There's nothing worse than training that's out to date. It's bad. It's not good for anybody. Seize every conversation as an opportunity for feedback. Excellent. Capture it somewhere if you can. Let's see what else we have. Open-ended questions from the group. Yes. Make it easy for them to deliver. I'm looking through a few of these others. Coffee chats with managers. That's excellent. Take people to lunch. Do whatever you need to do. Just it doesn't have to be formal. It can just make that happen. But the feedback and that data is so valuable to your job. And you can't stop. You can't assume that once you have it all, you're there, right? There you go, Ed. Thank you. Even if the feedback may seem offensive or feel, there's got to be some bit of truth, some nugget of wisdom in there that you can take out. You don't have to listen to all the ridiculous comments that are just absurd, right? But there might be something in there that is still applicable. Strip away the negative stuff and see, oh, actually, yeah, they have a point, right? Maybe it's exaggerated, maybe it's in frustration, but either way, thank you. Okay, we're gonna move on to the next section here. Finally, providing opportunities for connection. Anything you can do in your training, especially in the virtual setting, more conversation. If we were in a smaller audience, what I would be doing in each of these little sessions is we would be in breakout rooms. We would have small groups, 5 to 10 people, and maybe fewer, maybe three or four. And each of these topics of conversation would be handled in a small group where 3 or 4 can discuss. And then we would come back to the larger group and have the conversation, allow everybody to talk about and share their ideas across the whole audience. We have a lot of people and participants in this session, so it's just not as feasible. But there are ways to do it if you plan ahead and you prepare. Connection. There's some statistics here I want to talk about. IBM did a study recently that says the most important, most critical skill, again in 2019, willingness to be flexible and adapt to change. Whew, man, couldn't they have been more Nostradamus-like in their prediction, right? Leading into 2020. Like, and this isn't just the employee, but the whole business as a unit. You have to be flexible and you have to be adaptive to change. How do we know what to change if we're not listening and we're not gathering feedback? So very critical. Burson, I want to talk about this for a minute. Burson expresses this very clearly. Traditional learning delivery is different and it's not built for collaboration, right? We need solutions that deliver a learning experience. We need practice. We need application. We need hands-on, and dialogue and conversation is so critical. And even though I can't hear you with my ears, we're having a dialogue. We are in dialogue as we speak. Look at all the people that have shared comments. I'm seeing conversations back and forth between all of you. So even though it's a larger audience and maybe even harder to monitor and manage a chat, there is a dialogue happening. So keep that up. That has to happen. Find ways to infuse that conversation and dialogue into your virtual sessions as much as possible. People learn from each other. People learn from people, and learning is more impactful if you're doing it from instead of just one source. I'm not the trainer. I'm not like, I don't know anything more than any of you do. You're all intelligent folks. So I'm not here to teach. I'm here to facilitate conversations. And if we take that approach, we're going to be more successful in the delivery. I don't know everything and I don't need to know everything. I need to surround myself with smart people and allow those intelligent people to have conversations and discuss and to come up with good solutions. Job connection is important to the results of learning. If we include people in the process, learning results will increase. It will happen. We see better if there's peer support, if there's manager coaching, if there's individual coaching, and a learning culture overall from people. We learn from that. And we also understand that this is so important, and I know all of you know this, but learning is not an event. It doesn't happen in one thing. It doesn't happen in a 3-day session from 8 to 8. That is false. Learning is a process, and it takes a long time. And there have to be touch points and iterations. And the more people we can include in that process, the more opportunity we have to learn slightly differently and have a chance to really create that breadth of information. So thinking about techniques of learning and conversation, what are ways, and this is where we're going to start making some goals. What are ways you can create specific things in your learning design where we can include more conversation and more collaboration in your trainings? Whatever learning you're doing, think about that initiative. The design has to consider more practice, more application. Hopefully all of you are familiar with the Khan Academy. If you're not, the flipped classroom is really designed by Khan Academy, or as from my experience, it was. My daughter is in 8th grade right now, and she has a terrible time in math. It's just miserable. She goes to class in person. It's a lecture for an hour and 15 minutes. And then she comes home and is expected to know how to do all the work. Flipped classroom is different. I'm going to just explain it really quickly. Khan Academy did this online. The lectures are done on your own. They watch the video of the lecture of the math, and then they come together as a class and they do the work in person, right? The homework is done with the students all together and with the teacher, all in one. There's no reason we can't deliver training in our corporations and learning in a similar format. Think about, how can I flip that classroom? How can I deliver instruction where people can watch it multiple times? And then the time where we're with each other, we need less time together, but we need to make sure that time is effective and useful. I'm looking on the chat right now. I'm seeing a lot of people who are using Kahoot. They're using a storytelling module by Pixar. Excellent. How can storytelling be helpful in our training? 4 to 5 in a breakout room. Love it. Make smaller breakouts. Google Classroom. Excellent. VLT class led by general managers who are trained facilitators. Yes, train your managers. Train them on how to facilitate content. Saba Meeting. Excellent. Adobe Connect. These are all tools. Jamboards, Miro, lots of different ways to do this. There are dozens of tools online that can help you do that. Creating icebreakers. Excellent. Any other ideas? Please feel free to continue to throw them into the chat. I know how effective dialogue and conversation can be. And I learn the best with hands-on learning when I'm doing something live. And 80% of our workforce needs conversation skills. Those soft skills, we call them soft skills. I call them human skills. They're so critical. And the best way to train people to be adaptable to new environments and ready to change to a new role, as much as the hard skills are important, I believe the more important skill are the human skills. They need to learn how to adapt and communicate in those new settings. So teach conversation, teach and allow that to happen in your sessions. Physical activities, yes. When I taught junior high, we used to have our physical education department leaders come in and explain to the teachers how important physical activity is. It recharges your brain. And in my Spanish classes, we would stand up every 5 to 10 minutes and we were moving around the room doing a different activity. Now, it's a little harder to do virtually, but you can tell people, stand up, get up, move around, stretch, do something, move your body. And this is great. These are fantastic ideas. We're sharing. I'll ask for a few more examples if you can. What are ways you are delivering more, or what are goals you're creating to make sure you can deliver more conversation in the chat? And I'll start with one example. So at the one of the organizations I used to work with as a learning consultant, they wanted to deliver a leadership development training. So they were preparing the future executives for the organization. And they said, how do we do this? And some of the people suggested, well, we'll get together in a room for 3 days. We'll do an offsite and it'll be this. And I said, that could be valuable, but that alone will not give you what you want. You need to train people over time. You need to have consistent opportunities for people to learn from each other over multiple days, multiple weeks, multiple months, and possibly years. And so we designed a module that we would meet monthly. As opposed to meeting in 3 days for 8 hours, we would meet monthly for an hour to 2 hours and sometimes include lunch. Sometimes it was in person and sometimes it was remote. And then we wanted to build in learning activities and capstone projects within that. So they would do group work, sometimes on their own, sometimes together, and then they would present on it as a group. And over time, we saw these executives or future executives, high potential employees for leadership positions. They were slowly learning from each other on more effective practices and allowing their experiences to benefit their current role and then helping them deliver into future roles as well. So learning plans, Sherry, I'm looking at this, Sherry or Shari, I'm sorry. Either one of those is right, hopefully. Learning plans that step out, learning activities interspersed with observation and feedback from managers. Yes, exactly. Include feedback, include managers as much as possible. Building an LMS currently, so we continue learning and conversations between participants after our ILTs and VLILTs. Excellent. Find out in the delivery how to infuse conversation. Maybe it's forums of the same audience later on, so they can get together and talk about what they learned. And then make sure that learning is still present. And they're saying, well, how are you applying that learning? What are you doing with it? Pre and post work is excellent. It's excellent. And sometimes the post work is just, let's just get together for a conversation. Right? Excellent. So we can talk about it. Aaron, would you moderate these posts? Sometimes, yes. I've moderated them. I've included managers to moderate them. I've included other leaders to moderate them. But I think the facilitators are really good at creating and generating that conversation. So you don't have to teach anything, but make sure you include the leaders so they're there. Maybe even having a panel of leaders to share, but you facilitate. Great idea. Create tools that allow managers to navigate those conversations. Excellent. Meeting in a box, we used to create those for managers where they're just asking questions and letting people talk. Very helpful, and they can learn how to do that and facilitate a conversation. Subject matter experts involved in facilitation and conversations. Excellent. Great ideas. Everybody, we're slowly coming to the end of this, and I really appreciate it. I would like to just open it up at the moment now that we're kind of here. What are the questions you have? Happy to answer them myself, and we'll also allow some of the group to respond to these comments. So Patrice, raise your hand. I think, Patrice, go ahead and drop a question here in the chat.
And I'll kick us off with one that I saw in the chat earlier. How does one create an internet cafe on a department or business unit level? So like a virtual version of an internet cafe.
Internet cafe. Interesting. I'll give an example of what we do in my company. I don't know if it's exactly the same as what you're thinking, but we do company happy hour, but it's virtual. So there's our whole company is everywhere around the world. We're not all in one place and nobody's in an office. And so at least I think it's once a week or once every other week, we do a happy hour where it's kind of the same idea, this little like internet cafe, and everybody gets on, and sometimes they're like get to know you games. It's not really related to work. This is more for just collaboration and human connection. It's been really fun. We do, fun backgrounds or whatever. It really is as fun as the people that are involved. So the more exciting you do, sometimes we play bingo. Sometimes we have other activities that are, again, not necessarily related to work. But if you wanted to do those in a learning session as well, you could say, hey, you could do these lunch and learns types of things, but you could do them virtually. So everybody brings their lunch, everybody's there talking, and maybe you do have a topic related to work. So hopefully there are some other ideas on how to do that in the chat, but that's a great question, Alexandra. Thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, I want to build on that because I think I see this one. What about when you're creating an online learning community? The best way to share content and share expertise. So beyond social connection and opportunities where there's some learning involved as well. Would you add to that?
Yeah, I think the best way, internal within a company, there are ways to do that, and you can share content and best practices in a conversation or in a document. Go ahead and put something together in a Google Doc that can be shared across multiple organizations, best practices and tips. If it's something external beyond your team and your company, I've experienced situations where we do live forums via Zoom, right? With people from all over the place. And somebody kind of organizes a topic and says, let's do this. Honestly, LinkedIn has some great connection groups to find. And I found the same thing in Facebook. Other places where, yeah, it's a personal thing, but maybe there's a professional pursuit and there's a whole community of people who are looking for the same thing. And so whether you're big on mountain climbing or mountain biking or skiing or whitewater rafting or learning, there's a community for you, whether it's on Facebook or LinkedIn. And there's a lot of places to find support and where you can share best practices. As a junior high teacher, I was teaching Spanish. And so I connected with language teachers all around the globe who had ideas. And some of it was via Twitter. We used to tweet back and forth ideas. And we had other places to have forums as well, conversations around the best ways to teach language. So you just have to find those forums that you feel comfortable with. So great. I know Patrice had a comment in here somewhere. I don't know if, let's see, did she throw that question in here?
I think she did both of those questions. So I thought then they sort of built on each other as well.
Oh, great. Okay, perfect.
Yeah, I was going to switch gears to Charlie's question. I think this is in regards to when you were talking about flipped classrooms. So do you have any recommendations or guidance for folks who would be interested to create resources before the training time, and then how you use those class time to work on exercises together?
Yeah, I think anything that can be learned on one's own is what you would design for the pre-work, if you can. I mean, every situation is a little bit different, but think about like, if I'm learning terminology, for example, I need to learn that terminology. Some people are going to learn it in 5 seconds, and some people are going to learn it in an hour and a half or 2 hours, or maybe over multiple days. So if that content can be received and taken at one's own pace, you could do it via an LMS. You could upload a video of yourself delivering that, and then they can rewatch the video as many times as they want. It can be in a document, that you just send out. There's multiple ways of creating those resources, and then save the in-person, whether it's virtual or in-person stuff, for discussion and conversation around those topics. And I'll give you an example. I was helping an organization it was basically an event arena for an MBA team, right? And they were looking to train their security staff, and the security staff is part-time, and so there wasn't a lot of in-person time that they had. We had very limited in-person time. So what we delivered virtually that everybody could do on their own was just some of the basic policies around how to make sure we're keeping the proper security metrics in place during the event and after, pre and post and after, or pre and during. And then we saved the small amount of time, like the 15 to 30 minutes of where all of the security staff was there. And we talked about specific scenarios that they needed to be prepared for. And so I didn't facilitate that. We had one of the managers or even a police officer come and explain, okay, in these more extreme circumstances, this is what needs to happen. And there was discussion and there was conversation, but all of the smaller stuff, policy stuff, like that can be done on one's own time, or is more likely to learn, at one's own pace. Great comment. Great question.
Well, I see a good one about, this is going to leverage your facilitator background. Do you have any recommendations for folks who are trying to get their speakers to do more facilitating conversations in their sessions, and especially in their virtual sessions?
Well, one way is to collect data on their session and show it to them. I imagine that if they get feedback on a straight up lecture, people are going to say, if you ask for feedback, they'll probably say, I want more conversation. I'd love to be involved more. I'd love more engagement. And if you can show them that data, sometimes it's a little bit harsh, but you say like, look, your material's good, but the delivery isn't engaging. So how do we change that? And talk it through. And that's one way. I mean, sometimes it's a little harsh if you don't have that quality and you're not sure how to share that. It's just simple, small suggestions, right? Saying like, I think something that might help is let's create an activity a learning activity around this topic as opposed to just listening to you share it. And hopefully draw in from their experience. Like tell them, look, you've been in a Zoom meeting where somebody's sharing their screen and talking the whole time and there's no dialogue. There's no conversation. People tune out. What's your attention span? Mine's like 3 minutes, maybe. And so help them like humanize that person a little bit and give them a perspective that even if your content is excellent, people still have a very short attention span. And I think people have even a shorter attention span in a virtual world than they do in person. So, or at least it looks like it. So find ways to gently give them good topics and ideas and help them, like help design activities that they can utilize. But their content's probably great, especially if they're a SME, they know what they're talking about. But if the delivery is too dry and if the delivery isn't engaging, then we're not using the learning side of their brain. So focus on learning modalities and help them understand, how do people actually learn? It's not just from listening to one person talk for an hour, like I've been doing the whole time.
So this is a good segue, I think, into another question that came up earlier, which is, what do you do if you don't have time? You know that this is going to make your trainings more effective, but you guys just don't have time in your organization. How can folks approach that?
I've been there. I've been in situations where it's back-to-back trainings. You're in modules all day long, sessions, and you just don't have time. So you have to plan it ahead. Find those moments, find those 20 minutes. Maybe you're doing it at lunches. Maybe you're doing a little extra after work or before. Like you have to find a way, or you go to your leadership and explain, like, we need to adapt these models, but I don't have time. So help build a use case for another employee. Help build a use case and then evaluate all of the things you're doing in your everyday and see if there's anybody that can take some of that off your plate. Learn how to delegate. If you're building all your materials and there's a team that's willing to help you with that, do it. Let them handle it. I'm going to give you a small example that's unrelated, but it's related, but it's a different scenario. So I taught Spanish. One year when I was teaching Spanish, they asked me to direct a musical. Big, different. And I don't know a lot of this stuff. So the choir teacher, she did all of the teaching of the music. I didn't have to do it. And then I went to the art department and I asked them, hey, would your class want to build our set and paint it and do all that? They said, yes, we would love to. That's a big class project. So I handed off as much of the little things as I could, because I knew I couldn't handle it on my own. One, I didn't have the experience, and two, I didn't have the time. So look in your everyday and find out what are the things you can delegate, and find partners within your organization that are willing to help you, right? Even if it's not their full-time gig, but maybe they have the skill set and they're willing to be included.
Full of great advice. Well, we are getting really close to our hour here, and I see that folks are going to have to start dropping off, and our questions have dwindled down. We might not have hit all of them, but I will pass it to you for some closing thoughts before we wrap up for this afternoon.
Thanks, Alexandria, and thanks everyone for joining. We have a whole global audience here, and it's exciting. There are people who feel your pain. It's difficult being in learning and development, but know that you're not alone, and there's a lot of support and a network of people that you can connect with who have done similar things and maybe have good solutions for some of the challenges you're facing. And sometimes within your organization, it can feel isolated because maybe you don't know those people internally. So find them externally. Finally, the three big things. Remember, meet regularly with your business leaders. Get them to really help you joint design solutions for their teams. Do that regularly. Gather the feedback, listen to their teams, listen to the feedback, and implement that feedback into your training delivery. And finally, find ways to do more connection and collaboration in those sessions. Design your training so that we can do hands-on and more conversation and dialogue throughout, whether it's in person or whether it's virtual. And finally, remember, just because it's in person, it doesn't mean it's superior. And just because it's virtual, it doesn't mean that it's a lesser than experience. You can have excellent virtual trainings where connection and community is enhanced. Thank you, everyone. Happy to connect via LinkedIn or email. That information's in the post. So thanks for your time, and hope to chat with any of you that are interested. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Ben. Thanks for your time, your insights. As a learning science enthusiast myself, I thought this was a great session, great modeling, and you have lots of kudos happening in our chat, lots of thank yous and appreciation for your time and your insights today. And thank you to all of our attendees for being engaged and putting on your learning hats and learning with us today. We hope to see you again at another ATD webinar, and have a great afternoon.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.